All sides need to come to the table to solve these problems. Companies left to their own devices, you wind up with a fragmented system. Imagine if every TV channel had different rules for political advertising. That doesn't work. But regulators, not good at figuring out tech. I think that's one thing we're going to see on display later today. The government should set standards, leave the companies to come up with the creative implementations of them.
We've seen these companies go from saying nothing really happened to saying small things happened, and now they're talking 126 million people on Facebook, nearly 300 million impressions on Twitter. Are they going to try to cap what they believe the influence was? Set a number and say this no more than this?
Well, right now they're tracing it all back to this one entity, the Internet Research Agency, and its fan out. We don't know if there are other players, other patient zeros, if you will, out there. I think one transition we're seeing is the move of the conversation from the advertising piece of the equation to the more organic reach, which is of course where these platforms have their strength. I think today you'll hear sort of a three-prong argument. First, here are the facts, here are the numbers as we have them today. Second, here's the context. Here's how big our platforms are and why these things are actually quite small in their view. And three, here are the things that we have already done to address them and why we don't think Washington should get involved.
Adam, but the problem isn't really political advertising, is it? It's really knowing who are these people online, where are they, and what have their actions been over time? You know, are they trying to influence not only elections themselves, but the very political process in this country? Is any of the legislation or even proposed legislation that's being put out there really going to address those core issues?
No, not at all. And in fact, the only piece of legislation that has notably been introduced in the wake of this is the Honest Ads Act from Amy Klobuchar and Mark Warner that would simply say social media ads should have that paid for by so and such disclaimer that TV ads have. So we're just barely catching technology up to where we were 30 years ago in election regulation. The FEC had an opportunity to make these rules 6 years ago. Google and Facebook argued against. Twitter at the time actually did have those disclaimers. The FEC did nothing and obfuscation became the industry standard.
Why aren't we seeing the CEOs on the Hill? Is it just because they weren't summoned specifically and so they get away with sending their general counsels? I mean, isn't this a serious enough, big enough issue at this point where 126 million, half of the voting population of the US are exposed to these ads, that we should see a Sheryl Sandberg or a Mark Zuckerberg on the Hill?
I don't know who the committee actually called to testify, so I can't speak to whether it was the committees or the companies that chose who to speak. I think one thing you will see today is evidence of the culture clash. You will find no two further disparate mindsets than Washington and Silicon Valley, and at least the general counsels, I think, have that legal backing to try to speak both languages.